Thank you for having us today. And thank you for that nice introduction, David. Very much appreciated. I am now sharing my screen. Can everyone see my PowerPoint? Thumbs up. Awesome. Great. Okay. So I think Jennifer is actually going to start.
Sure, not a problem. Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. This slide is just telling you who we are. We work at an organization in Maine that works with small businesses, and there's a lot more print in here. Happy to tell you more about it. Sarah runs our Women's Business Center, which works around the state of Maine, helping businesses start and grow. And CI also does some lending and policy work, again, always around small business. We've been very active in learning the latest and greatest next COVID relief funds, and this is one of those programs, I will say, and we'll get into it. And it maybe won't make you feel any better, but this one is truly a gem. So any and all questions from you are going to be completely fine. It's a really unique and tricky program. So we're happy to be here to chat with you about it. I think you can go to the next, yep. And this is us. Yeah, already covered it, super.
So we have two quick polls that we're going to have Ryan do. We're just looking to get a read on who's in the room today. So Ryan, if you want to launch those, and the reason is we know we're a nice small group, and we're going to tailor a little bit what we say today depending on who's here. So you should have had a poll pop up on your Zoom. There you go. Okay. So far we have a majority live performing arts organization operators. That's a mouthful. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. And Ryan, maybe you want to move us to the next poll. All right, so we're just looking to learn where you are in the SVOG process. Okay. So a bunch of folks who have not yet applied. And one person who clearly couldn't think of anything more exciting to do this morning if their answer is SVO what? Welcome anyways. You're sure to learn something with us this morning. Awesome. Okay.
Hey,
great.
Sarah, can you tell me, I don't see the results of the polls. Can you just tell me what the
Oh, sorry. Is? I guess I thought everyone was seeing them. Oh, I'm going to share the results.
Thanks.
How's that? So we have someone who applied and thought it went smoothly, 2 who have applied and have some concerns, 3 who know they're eligible but have not applied, 4 who have not applied and don't know if they will, and someone who doesn't know why they're here. Great.
And then, okay, super. Did you have a breakdown of the entities as well?
I didn't. The first one, just what I jotted down, 7 were live performing arts operators. 1 was a live venue and 1 is a museum.
Cool, thanks.
That doesn't capture everyone who's here, but those are the folks who responded. Yeah. Great. So I think we'll stick with our general overview, Jen.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
So we did, as we, Sarah and I are going back and forth, created what we're calling a general overview, but we do want to tailor it again for who's in the room. So this is a pretty basic high level, but we're completely open to detailed questions. And you know, we have on the agenda that Q&A can happen at the end, but sometimes it's really just, it's, you know, the question is really appropriate for while we're talking. So If you want, you can raise your hand or you can type it in chat.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, so just a quick, right, Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. That's what this is. We're gonna almost exclusively call it the SVOG while we're talking, but that's what we're talking about today. And it was authorized and then tweaked a little bit through two bills, the Economic Aid and then the American Rescue Plan Act. It is 16 billion going in grants. Those grants are being administered by the SBA, the Small Business Administration, through their Office of Disaster. And, oh, something just changed there. Super, and you can, so that's what we're talking about. If that's not what you thought we were talking about, like you wanted to talk about the restaurants, we're not talking about the restaurant grants today. So you can go to the next slide, Sarah. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways to qualify to be eligible. One of the first ones is that you need to have been in business and be able to show some level of being in business as of February 29th, 2020. The locations, you need to have a US-based business. The size limitations in general is not, there are these sort of funky limited sizes, but it doesn't really impact too many people. It gets into if you're crossing 10 states and multiple countries, then the number of employees plays out. And then we're going to get into all the different business types. They use the term entity that are eligible, and that's got its own slide. So I think you can go to the next slide, Sarah. Thanks. So it does seem like we have, for the most part, we're in kind of a few areas here. So the live venue operators is really quite a broad term, right? But having some live performances, and they have quite a list in their FAQs of what that means. If you're a promoter, but you need to be a promoter of and a talent representative of sort of more than one, theatrical producer, a live performing arts organization, museum operators, and I will say, so these are the entities, and then they go into very specialized requirements depending on which entity you are. And so I have this asterisk next to museums because you cannot be a for-profit museum, which I think wasn't super clear in the beginning. And motion picture theater operator owner and talent representative. Not seeing any specific questions on those. Yep, so we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so if you haven't applied and you want to, you should apply today. This is a first come, first serve sort of grant, and we're going to get into that. Sarah's going to talk a little bit about what that means. They have some priorities, but they are the application open, and you should be applying if you want access to these funds, because it is quite expected. And I just hate saying this, like I can't believe we haven't learned from our other grants that it will be oversubscribed. So and you need to do a whole host of things to apply. You need a DUNS number if you do not have one. We have links actually to all of these things. So if you need those, we can provide how to apply for a DUNS. It's free. Takes a couple days, can take a couple days to get the DUNS. With that, you need the DUNS to be able to apply through the federal government's SAM. And that's a registration that nonprofits that or entities that get government grants have to register in their system. You only have to register. Their processing can take a while. So you don't, in fact, have to have that process resolved to be able to apply. That was originally the case, but then they realized they were they got really busy in the SAM registration. So you can be in the system applying for your SAM and apply for this grant. The SBA website has really important information on it. And the latest update for everything was April 23rd. Strongly encourage you to look at those documents versus ones you may have looked at in early April, because they have updated them. Thanks, Julie, for that's the DUNS link if you need to get a DUNS. And so on their website, they have the checklist, which will help you think through all the documents you need, right? The different financial documents. And we can go into detail if people have those questions. It depends on what kind of entity you are, but the list is pretty, it's including for all different types of businesses. Then they have an FAQ. I actually can't recall the length of it now, but it's quite long.
41.
How many now, Sarah?
41.
Oh, okay. So 41 pages of very important questions, frequently asked, helpful, and very specific to different types of businesses. There's sort of a general section, and then they go into really detail. So that's also useful. And then the applicant user guide is showing you what the application looks like. So it's screenshots of the portal, and it's walking you through how to apply within the portal. And we can go into that one too if people have specific questions. It's pretty fantastic. I'm not very good at holding back my opinions. It's interesting, I'll just say that. So, but having the screenshots can be really helpful, especially if you're like, for me, I like to see that, or I like to do it. And so seeing how you need to go through. So when you're applying, it'd probably be good to have that open on the side also, and you can kind of go through, just because even though they tried to make this user-friendly, you know, probably isn't. And so, right, just 6, like, you should apply today if you haven't and you think you are eligible. Sarah and I are available for conversations. We'll give information after if people want to call us and ask specific questions about their business if you don't get them answered here, or to talk through a little bit. And again, I just want to encourage any question. This is not an easy, I just don't think this is a really easy process. And so if you think your question is too basic, it's probably not too basic for this, with this grant. So that was pretty quick, but those are the, you know, high level things you need to kind of gather and get together to be able to apply.
Great, thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
So I am going to cruise through a couple more slides. Our goal is to be done talking by about 10:30 so that we can have a robust Q&A session with all of you. So the SBA has determined these priority periods based on percent revenue loss for different entity types. The reason that Jen was saying that you should apply now versus waiting for your priority period is the whole SVOG happens on a first come, first serve basis. They're slotting people into these priority periods now. So if you apply today and you're in the 3rd priority period, you might be, I don't know, 6,000 in line. If that many people in that priority period have already applied, they're just not processing those periods yet. So again, just to be very clear, do not wait until your priority period to apply. Apply now and get in line for when they start processing your priority period. There is a 3rd one, which is supplemental funding, which is essentially, if there's any money left over after the first 3 priority periods, they'll redistribute amongst existing awardees. We have no idea if this will or will not happen. But again, you know, get in queue now. So when you apply, you're going to submit a budget. that covers how you'll use the SVOG funds to cover expenses for a 12-month period that begins on the date of your award. So you have to make a little bit of an assumption based on when your priority period is, when your award will be dispersed. But then you want to show how you'll use those funds in an allowed way to cover expenses for 12 months out. There is a little bit of a wrinkle here in that you need to spend them all by December 31st, 2021. So there's a slight difference in when they can cover and when they must be expensed. And I'm actually just going to change my view here so that I can see my notes for a minute and make sure that I'm giving you the exact right information as I say that. So stick with me here just 1 minute so I can make sure I'm saying it exactly right. Amazing that I've lost my notes. Okay, so stick with me. Oh, I think I'm gonna get there. Okay, there you go. Okay, there is a lot of conversation about gross and earned revenue in the SVOG program. It's a really important distinction to understand. Earned revenue is money that you have earned through sale of goods or services, tickets, merchandise, food, beverages, advertising sales, contracted income with presenters. It's money people are paying you for in return for a specific good or service. Gross revenue is all the revenue that you've received in whatever form for whatever source. So this is a broader definition that includes contributions, donations, grants. It does exclude any disaster assistance funding. So that would be EIDL funds or PPP funds that you have received previously. So your award is based on your gross earned revenue. If you were in operation before January 1 of 2019, your grant will be 45% of your 2019 gross earned revenue, or 10 million, whichever is less. If you began operations after January 1, 2019, they will take your average monthly gross earned revenue for each full month you were in operation. So take an average for 2019, multiply that by 6, and award you either 10 million or whichever is less. And I just see a question coming in here on the chat related to what we're talking about. If the PPP was forgiven and converted to a grant, does that count with gross revenue, or is it still considered disaster assistance? Jen, I'm looking at you as I say this. I believe that PPP is considered disaster assistance.
Yeah, the PPP plays into, it will reduce the amount of your grant. Is that answering your question, Stacy? So
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So I think what's so tricky about this, and you're going to see Sarah and I kind of like pausing, that things play multiple roles in this grant. So revenue plays multiple roles. Disaster assistance plays multiple roles. Employee size plays multiple roles. So we may, I actually have the FAQs open here. So bear with us. We'll dig in it too. We do not have it all stored in our brain, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, great. So let's see, just a couple of other notes about the grant amount. They are reserving $2 billion for applications with less than or equal to 50 full-time employees. So that hits a lot of our businesses here in Maine. That is different than the priority periods. So essentially they're saying, as we go through those priority periods, we're gonna pull those businesses that have 50 or less full-time employees and make sure they receive, at least $2 billion in funding. So again, apply now if you haven't yet, and you're interested in applying. And so this speaks to what Jennifer just said for entities who've received a PPP loan on or after December 7th, which is when the latest 27th Economic Aid Act was passed. Your SVOG will be reduced by the amount of your PPP loan. And it is not reported to the IRS as taxable income. We just get that question a fair amount. So allowed uses of funds, payroll costs, rent payments, utility payments, scheduled mortgage payments, though you can't, make a year's worth of principal payments ahead. It would be nice if you could. Scheduled debt payments for debt that you incurred prior to February 15th, 2020. Worker protection expenditures. So this is things like PPE or plexiglass shields that you've installed or air filtration systems. Payments to independent contractors. Other ordinary and necessary business expenses. So this is the same definition that the IRS uses, is that business expenses must be ordinary and necessary. And the SBA, for the purposes of the SVOG, has made a pretty firm line that you can't use the SVOG funds to pay for capital expenses. So you can't put on a new roof on your facility, for example, with the SVOG funds, but they have allowed maintenance costs. So the example they cite is, if every year you replace a few shingles on your roof, you can do that with your SVOG funds, but you can't entirely re-roof your building with SVOG funds. So there's, of course, a little bit of nuance there. Administrative costs, state and local taxes and fees, payments for any leases for space or equipment that you had prior to February 15th, 2020, insurance payments, and then again, advertising capital expenditures related to producing a theatrical or live performing arts production. So the example they give here is if you're building out a set for a specific show, that's fine. If you're just generally upgrading your theater to make it nicer, that's a no-go for the SVOG funds.
Hey, Sarah, I'm seeing a question from Kathy that says, it's just back to the PPP and earned income.
Yeah.
And it just says, so you figure out your earned income and then subtract the PPP money. I think, Kathy, what you're getting at, that the application itself, you're putting in data, like you're putting in, if you got the PPP, you're putting in your revenues, both earned and gross, and then it does a calculation for you. Is that answering your question?
Yes, that answers my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's like, you just need to have that information and yeah, super.
Okay.
And then Sarah, just to get,
Yeah, please do.
Oh, okay. Sarah responded to Susan. So there's a question in about this LD 1566, which I believe is the hearing happening right now. That would be my guess, which I am not familiar with, but it looks like you guys all are, and you're answering those questions.
Yeah.
Karen,
Jen, I also have a question here about for a fixed seating requirement, minimum number of seats. I don't know the answer to that question. Is there a minimum number of fixed seats required?
I don't know the answer to that either. And the fixed seat is also specific to different entities. I can dig in.
Yeah, I was wondering if you might poke on the FAQ while I finish our few remaining slides here. So, okay, here's what I wanted to get at earlier. So SVOG funds can cover allowable expenses that happen between March 1st, 2020, so you get to go a ways back here, and December 31st, 2021. So that's the period when the expenses can have incurred. You must spend your funds within 1 year of disbursement. So you can reimburse for expenses that have already incurred. Of course, you want to have back up and proof for those expenses, but if you can show that you paid contractors, paid personal protective equipment for employees starting as early as March 1st, 2020, or lease or rent on equipment again, or debt payments, you can go retroactively and reimburse for those things. You have to spend all the funds within a year, right? So just so we're clear, what this means is if your SVOG funds were dispersed on June 1st, you would have between June 1st, 2021 and June 1st, 2022 to actually spend the money for it to leave your bank account. But it needs to cover expenses that occurred between March 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2021. If you receive supplemental funding, the timeline just shifts a little bit, so it can cover expenses until June 30th of 2022, and you'll have 18 months to actually spend the funds. Things that you may not do with SVOG funds: buy real estate, make payments on loans originated after February 15th, make investments or loans to other individuals or entities, make political contributions, or pay for any other use prohibited by the administrator, which is a pretty broad bucket, and we're referring to the SBA administrator here. Okay, great. So now we want to hear from you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can also open all of the copious amount of SVOG information that I have open on my computer. I'm going to take a minute and cruise through the Q&A. I think we've got most of your questions as we were talking. But we'd love to hear, either write it in the chat or chime in. What brought you here today? What are you hoping to know? What can we answer for you?
I have a question. If we're a venue and we do conferences and workshops and performing arts all summer long, and we couldn't do it last year, obviously, and we did it the year before. So the formula to the amount of money that we get is actually based on 2019, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we could pay for, because we're looking at how are we going to pay for summer staff. We have about half of the people signing up for events and stuff right now compared to 2019. So we know we're going to be smaller. And then I'm thinking, I got to get to the summer of 2022. So I'm frightened to do too much in terms of adding staff or fixing up the place. You know, we're on the beach, and so summers, you know, the winter kind of hurts us a bit. So you're saying that through this, the possibility exists that I earn it by the 2019 numbers and I could pay for this year's summer.
Very much.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and then, you know, in a best case scenario, I suppose well, that's a funny thing to say right now, isn't it? That you would be able to pay for this summer with SVOG funds and pocket some of this summer's earnings, if there were any, to give you that leg up for next summer that you talked about.
Right, because that's really our biggest challenge. Is this is a long game, you know.
Exactly.
This is 3 years. You know, it's like having a drought and then trying to address the next couple of years of what that drought looks like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So we have a question in the chat about music mixing studios, if this covers music mixing studios. And I just want to be clear, Howard, so I understand a music mixing studio to be a place where artists come, there's no live audience, and a sound engineer is working with the artists to mix the music. That was my basic music vocab. But is that correct? There's no live audience involved? Just so.
Yeah.
Okay. So operating on that assumption, Howard, this would not cover music mixing studios because you're not though the artist might be there live, there's no live audience, so there's not that performance component as defined by this grant. You're also not selling tickets or entry fees, food or beverage or anything else as part of that interaction with the artists. Jen, feel free to jump in if you want to elaborate here.
No, that's correct. It's very specific about, yeah, performance.
Okay, great.
And it's just not going to cover everyone in the industry, which is very frustrating. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jamie, I want to get to you. We just have one follow-up question on that. If the venue did live stream, does that fit? So are you asking if the music mixing studio was live streaming? Susan, not sure what you're asking. My answer would be, if you are a performance venue that is live streaming, so if you're the State Theater in Portland, Maine, and you've moved your concerts to live streaming and you're selling tickets for those, that is covered. If you're a music mixing studio and you're saying, you know, hop on Facebook Live and watch this mixing happen, that would not be covered. Jamie, feel free to jump in with your question.
Yeah, hi. Do you have any word or news to when they'll be distributing some of the grant money?
I have heard, I got an email from the SBA this morning that said end of May.
End of May? And also, do you
Don't
know
hold me
about,
to it though. That's what the email said. It was
I'm
a
going
generic
to.
email, sorry, not a
I'm gonna hold
specific
you to
email to
it.
me.
And also, do you have information that if you do receive a grant, that there's some reporting you're gonna have to do? What do you know about that?
So the SBA also said to, they're going to hold a webinar about the follow-up reporting requirements and other items for those. And they had said that would happen this week. I haven't seen an invitation or anything. And so it's possible, it is still possible that they will announce something that's going to happen today, if anyone's been paying attention, or they're going to do it next week, you know, and it's sometime soon they're going to give that webinar.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
The little bit that we do know at this point is that you need, you'll want to maintain 3 or 4 years of records. And I say 3 or 4, there's a nuance there, Jen, that's escaping me at this moment. Maybe you know it, but you know, if we could offer one piece of advice right now, it would be keep your receipts and keep your records, particularly because this is retroactive. You know, you can use this for expenses incurred as soon as March 1st, 2020. And so you want to have records to substantiate how you've spent those funds.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, so the information that we saw in your PowerPoint, is that something that you could send to us and I get access to that easily enough?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Let's see, so I'm a part of a Mid-Coast Community Chorus. We're over 100 member singing group whose voices are now getting dried up because we haven't done any singing to speak of except, you know, here at home. But so anyway, that seems to, and we do 2 concerts a year, sell tickets, sell beverages, all that kind of stuff. So it seems like we certainly fit the criteria for this grant. And how quickly and can I get to the grant application and all that kind of stuff? Do I just go online and do it that way? Can it be filled out online, or do I need a hard copy?
It's an all online process. So getting your sam.gov, the DUNS is online, all of those steps. Yeah, you'll do it online. It's available now. We would encourage you to apply today.
Great.
It varies based on what data you have collected, how long it takes. I've heard anywhere between 20 minutes and 3 hours, the actual application. So block off a chunk of your time, you know,
Okay.
pop some popcorn or something and, you know, settle in.
Yeah.
And John, just to be super clear there, if your organization does not have a DUNS number,
I think
which
we
it may or
do.
may not, you need to do that first before you can apply. And if you don't have a registration in sam.gov, which you likely wouldn't, you need to do that first, then you're good to go. Those are just like the two pieces you have to lay the groundwork for.
What is the SAM? What is the SAM thing? What is that about?
That's the federal system for any entity who gets a grant from the federal government. It's their registration
Okay,
system.
we
Yeah.
did get a PPP grant, so. Is that,
Unrelated, yeah, because the
Right.
PPP is actually a forgivable loan. So those went through the existing SBA programs.
okay,
And this one, which makes it so incredibly special, is that it's this grant, it's a federal grant. And so they're making you all go through the process that entities that get federal grants have to go through.
okay, great.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I don't mean to be rude, but I have to get back to work. So thank you for this.
Yeah, no worries. Go apply for that grant. We
All right,
want
and I
you to
look
get
forward
it.
to look forward to getting the information that we just saw earlier.
Yep.
Great, thanks a lot.
Sarah, there
Jennifer
are,
and Sarah, I want to make sure that we try to get to this one. How many
Yeah.
fixed seats qualify if they are a performance space with 30 seats, but basically it's a convertible space and only the first row are fixed. So if you've got a
Okay.
very small amount that are fixed, does that still qualify?
I'm not, oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, well, I just popped something from the FAQs in the chat. I didn't see a number for fixed, a minimum of fixed seats. I know that question was asked earlier, but it is defined fixed seating. And it says a majority of the seating provided in that space must meet the definition of fixed audience seating. So if you have
But
30, yeah.
let's be clear, the fixed seating is only required for museums and movie theaters. And I think that's that's something that is unclear to a lot of people. So I don't know what type of entity is asking, but it's only for those entities. I've seen that one because again, it's not super clear, be very confusing.
So if who is asking that question wants to clarify a little bit, feel free to, or anybody, feel free to jump in. Oh.
Also,
That definition again in the chat. I apparently just sent that to one person. Sorry.
oh,
Go ahead, Jen.
oh, my gut, if you're willing to do it, I would, and so you're unsure, and let's say you are a museum and you've got this fixed seating and it's part of it, I would still, if it were me, I would still apply. Because they don't, I think it's a little loosey-goosey with the way Sarah defined it. So again, you need to be comfortable with it yourself, but what they're getting at here is that you do live performances and they're a part of your business structure, right? So that's, if you feel strongly that that's a part of your business structure in the past and likely going forward, that would be me. So yeah. And someone just asked me to include in the chat. So I'm gonna mute myself and dig here and send that into the chat on where that says only those businesses.
Oh, I can copy paste it. I'm right there on the
Okay.
FAQs.
Yeah, it's page
On page
8, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it basically says, oh wow, it pastes so funny. Sorry about that. The question is a museum or movie theater with a multi-purpose room with movable seating eligible? And the answer is no, it requires fixed seating. And then if you scroll way down to the bottom of that FAQ, it says, there's no fixed audience seating requirement for other types of eligible entities.
And one other thing that they have clarified, and I think it's in here, is like, let's say you have bleachers, like in schools where the bleachers like move, right? They all stack on each other. that's considered fixed, which maybe you wouldn't think is, but because it moves. But the SBA is sort of calling that like cumbersome, or like it's, you know, you wouldn't be able to like take it out and use it elsewhere in your business. So. Yes, Jamie.
Yeah. Do you guys know if there'll be an appeal process, a mechanism if you get a negative, if you don't get the grant?
My understanding is that there are several things that you may hear from the SBA on. One is the do not pay list. So if you are on this list called do not pay, they're going to allow you to appeal that, and you will hear from them, and you will have a process in place. The second one is that tax form, the 40, gosh, how have I?
506T.
Yeah. If something just goes awry there, they're going to allow you to fix that.
Yeah. And
Other than that, I don't know. I don't think so.
No. So the way that the application is structured, if you make a mistake that qualifies you as ineligible for this grant, or if you enter something that qualifies you as ineligible, there will be a pop-up on the portal, and it will say like, what you're doing says that you're ineligible, so that you can see and have an opportunity to correct that before you can submit. You can also save and edit your work before you submit it, but once you've submitted, they're pretty clear, this again is in their FAQs, that you cannot appeal the decision unless it's related to that do not pay list or the 4506T. So pay attention when you're preparing your application to those things that pop up that say, like, this doesn't make sense, or it would render you ineligible, and correct those before you submit.
Sarah, can you explain what a do not pay list, how would you explain that?
Go for it, Jen.
To me, that means you have failed to pay the federal government on some past debt, and they've got you on a list. Do not pay.
So you didn't stay in compliance for some reason. Is that right?
Yeah.
You kind of got put on with federal funding. You didn't stay
Yeah,
in
you could
compliance
have
with federal funding.
defaulted on a federal loan. It's very possible student loans might fall in there. I don't know the full list, but my gut tells me that certainly student loans would fall in there.
Is there a way to find out if you're on that list? Would there be a way to ask and say, I mean, maybe they aren't aware of it. Maybe they should be, but would you know if there was some place to contact to say, are we?
Find out. I'm not
Are we on the
sure
bad list?
about that, but I can certainly look into it. Yep.
Yeah, again, my gut is that you're gonna know if you're on that list, because the SPA is, just like, I think you would know, but we can see, Julie, if there's a way for a.
And there are errors, right? I mean, like any list. So you might get a rejection because two numbers were entered incorrectly, right? And they've linked you to someone else's social or whatever.
And there's often a lot of turnover in staffing, and sometimes new, I've had where new development directors or new executive directors were not aware of previous year's finances, and they see this and they're just gung-ho to get in there and get apply and get the money without even being aware of maybe past mistakes, financial mistakes. That's all.
Right, but I think this is going to look at not right. It could be looking at the entity that didn't do it, or the individual, right? Yeah.
And can I add to that? Nonprofits, of course, they don't have owners, they don't have social security numbers. So things like student loans wouldn't necessarily come into effect here. And I have to jump off because this LD 1566 is going on, and I want to be a part of that. But I just want to share the perspective nationally as well, because I'm in communication with a lot of nonprofit state associations across the country and the National Council of Nonprofits. And this is a $16 billion program, which sounds like a lot of money, but it really isn't when we're up against, you know, the large museums and movie theaters and all the rest. And the largest grant can be as much as $10 million. This really is going to go quickly. So like you're saying, apply, you know, even if you think you're not eligible, just apply. Again, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jennifer. We're thrilled that CEI is, again, I'm from the Maine Association of Nonprofits, but we're thrilled that you're managing this program. And also thank you to the folks at the Maine Arts Commission. And we're always happy to help as well. And I've popped my email in the chat box a few times. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Sarah. Just want to clarify, we're not managing the program, but we are trying to help people navigate it. We didn't create it, we didn't design it, but we're certainly trying to help people understand it.
I have a question, and you know, it's more big picture, so not really related to what we're just exactly talking about, but we are all small not-for-profits, most of us on this call, and there are so many little grant sources out there right now. And even going back to your first PPP or your second PPP, and there's something to do. I don't have the resources to do this. I have a bookkeeper part-time. I've reached out to a couple of other people that we know on our board for looking stuff. I've talked to King's office about trying to do something that would help pay for all this, so that, because it looks so easy to me to make a mistake and to be then sort of double dipping on certain things. We have an EIDL loan, we have 2 PPPs. We may not be able to get any other funds at this point, but we know we're long from where we really need to be in order to get ourselves through this summer and into next. So I wondered if anybody that you guys know is advocating for this idea that all of us little people, we need different sort of help.
Yes, you're not alone in that thought. And we are certainly providing feedback to the delegation when we are hearing it from, we're in fact managing one of those little Lowe's grant projects right now, just on the side, right? So for low to moderate income owned businesses in Maine. So we get that it's completely overwhelming. And I think I will say there's been some of the changes that we've seen in these programs is because the feedback that you all are getting to the delegation is then the tweak, right? This program got funded and created and then tweaked 2 months later, even before it was rolled out. But, and so that can be even more confusing. I think there's still work to be done to make these programs reach the smallest of the small. So you're not alone in thinking it. We're trying to get that voice into the program, into that, but there's still, I guarantee, next month, there's going to be yet another niche specialized program that we all have to learn about and figure out how it fits. So I don't have a great answer for you. I should stop talking now, actually.
I would just add in, Kathy, and again, it's not kind of doesn't solve your problems, but something like the SVOG, you could use some of that funding to pay for some more hours of your bookkeeper or an accountant who could help answer some of those questions. And in fact, I know that, the first goal is to survive and cover those basic, make your rent or your mortgage or whatever. But if you can, I think that using some of these funds in that way is a really great use of funds, because if nothing else, you're paying for a little peace of mind and knowing that you are doing, some of these things right. And so I just encourage you, as you, for example, apply for the SVOG and make a budget, which you have to submit, to include in that, more than you might usually spend on an accountant to help you navigate some of the issues that you just raised.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, even we reached out to some of the, our auditor, and they were like, "We don't know. we don't want to know. We're not doing this work." And so we've reached out to other people who are doing it. So I appreciate it. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
And I think your point on double dipping is, honestly, I hear that more. People are more concerned the smaller the entity, but we're, I don't know, 5 years into this, 14 months into it, whatever the timeline is that we're into it. So it's a long period of time, right? Your PPPs have been spent, right? Likely. So again, you can have these funds. You just have to make sure when the PPP is spent, it's spent on this period of time, and then this comes in. And so and you can go back on this one, but you can also go forward, which is really nice. And then your EIDL, if you have an EIDL loan, that thing's 30 years. Just push it out. Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions before we wrap up?
Any other? You don't have to put them in the chat room either. Feel free to step up or raise your hand. Okay.
Well,
Okay. I any last thoughts, Sarah and Jennifer? Any
just
last
simply
words?
a reiteration that we are here to help. And, if we've learned one thing throughout the past 14 months, it's that we don't know all the answers, and these programs are really hard to interpret, but I always joke that we're great answer finders. So we're happy to help find the answers that you need. You can call us or email us. I wouldn't suggest leaving me personally a voicemail, but you can certainly call or email. And we're happy to help as we can. We want you to survive.
I've included in the chat box both of your emails as well as the website to CEI. And I just encourage everybody that CEI, Coastal Enterprise Inc. is an amazing organization. If you haven't gone there to look, they're incredible in funding, advisement, financial advisement. They're just fantastic. They've got many great programs beyond helping us understand these other larger opportunities coming by, and that they have done a tremendous job in going through all the training with Small Business Association. So they're getting firsthand training from them to try and best interpret and understand what's going on. So they are that much closer to the SBA. So I think it's been fantastic that you guys have been here and helped us as sort of the middleman in between and answer this great, wonderful, sort of intimate discussion. I like these groups where it feels like everybody can put in their ideas and their voice and it's heard. So thank you everyone for coming today. And we hope this has been of great benefit to you. Look forward to seeing you all again in the future. We will continue to monitor what's going on, as David said earlier, in funding so many opportunities, and we're going to help get those across to you as best we can. So thank you everybody for joining us this morning, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for having
Thank you
us.
all.